Welcome to Narrative 9 of Dialed In. This is a coffee project where our goal is to extract the coffee origin to higher flavor and mouthfeel targets. We will extract the coffee origin through pour-over, batch brew, and espresso. We have a 7-part system that will help us build the complementary extraction recipe. Once we have found a complementary extraction recipe for each medium, we will compare and contrast, and then we will give our recommendations as to which medium complements the origin the most. The first step in our 7-part process is familiarizing ourselves with some important details about the origin. In part 1, we'll analyze the roast degree, and then we'll take a look at where the origin is from, what are the components that it's made of, how high it was grown, how the seed was removed from the fruit, and finally how it was dried. This origin that we're working with for Narrative 9 comes from Central America. It's comprised of 2 varietals, Catura and Catuay. The elevation that it was grown was between 1,400 to 1,500 meters above sea level. This origin went through the honey process method, where the seed is left to dry with a good amount of mucilage still attached to it. When we extract this origin, we can then expect the pulpy, sweet, and juicy cup profile. In part 2, we will perform a cupping with several water profiles to find one that's complementary to this origin. Our understanding of what water profile would work well for coffee extraction comes from this book. The research in this book demonstrates to us the mineral components and the ratio between general hardness and alkalinity that a water profile needs to have. So when we extract the coffee origin, we can detect the full range of aroma and flavor. This graph represents on one side general hardness and on the other side alkalinity. The zone outlined in red represents the ideal range that we should be in between general hardness and alkalinity. The 3 water profiles that we'll be cupping with all lie within this ideal zone. These 3 water profiles are different in terms of mineral amount and ratio between general hardness and alkalinity. On the left is the cupping recipe that we will use, and on the right is the cupping protocol that we will perform. Specifically, what we want to do at 4 minutes is start analyzing the aroma, and then at 20 minutes we'll analyze the flavor. We want to take in consideration when something is more noticeable. We feel when the solution is hotter, the aroma is more volatile, and as the solution cools down, the flavor becomes more noticeable. Ultimately, we're looking for a water profile that will complement the origin that we're trying to extract. The origin that we're working with today, we performed the cupping off camera. After comparing and contrasting the 3 water profiles, we feel the simple and sweet recipe complements this origin the most. This will be the water recipe that we'll be going forward with. In part 3, we will provide a demonstration of our 3 extraction methods. For pour over, we will be using the next level Pulsar dripper. It's a device made up of 3 parts, and this is the base of the dripper. It's circular and the material provides good heat retention. This is the middle portion. It's cylinder in shape and it's made out of a thermostable plastic. And the top portion is a dispersion screen. The material contains both rubber and the thermostable plastic. And what you just saw is the circular bleach filter that we will be using. We'll now get into how we prep the device. As you have noticed, there is a hole in the center and there's a valve on the side that can control the opening and closing of the decanting process. What we did just now is close the valve, fill it with a little bit of hot water, and then place the filter. This allows us to preheat the base and create a suction between the filter and the base. We'll next attach the cylinder middle portion to the base. We'll then add our ground coffee. We'll settle the coffee grounds as flat as possible, and then we'll attach the distribution screen. Presented to you here is the recipe and protocol on how we'll perform an extraction with the next level dripper. We will be using a coffee to water ratio of 1 to 19.82, and we will perform 1 bloom and 4 pulse pours. The bloom will be 3 times the dose, and we will rotate the slurry to saturate as much of the grounds as possible. We will also close the valve to encourage a further saturation of all the grounds, and the amount of time that it will bloom for will depend upon the roast degree of the origin. Afterwards, the first pulse pour will be 90 grams, and the following pulse pours will be in increments of 60 grams. As you'll be able to see, the height of our slurry will be relatively low. This is because we want to encourage agitation, which will increase our chances of extracting more fully. The rest periods between pulses will vary from 10 seconds to 20 seconds. There are several reasons why we selected the next level Pulsar as our option for pour over. It's filtered and the brew base is wide and flat. The device is made up of materials that retain heat. The dispersion screen distributes the water more evenly onto the grounds, and the valve on the side, which gives us control over the decanting process, gives us a better chance to extract more evenly and fully. This concludes the sample video of how we will extract with the next level Pulsar. We'll now move on to a demonstration of how we will perform batch brew extraction with the Breville Precision Brewer. The reason we picked the Breville is because it has several positive attributes. The brew basket is flat as opposed to cone, which we feel extracts more evenly. It is able to perform a bloom, and importantly we can control the bloom time, the brew temp, and the flow rate. Presented to you here is how we prep and perform a batch brew extraction. We preheat the brew basket, filter, and thermal carafe. We then settle the coffee grounds as flat as possible. We'll add our brew water to the reservoir, and then we'll begin the brew cycle. Here is a closer look as to how we control the variables. Our settings will change depending upon certain attributes about the origin, like its roast degree and the density of the seed. Here is a sample recipe that we will be using for batch brew extraction. These settings will be adjustable depending upon when the origin was roasted, how developed it was roasted, and the density of the seed. For example, if the origin was lightly developed, then our bloom time and brew temperature would increase, and if the origin was more developed, then our bloom time and brew temperature would decrease. We'll now get into how we prepare for espresso extraction. We'll first be using a 58mm portafilter, and we'll be using a VST 20-gram basket. A common theme of this project dialed in is to serve an origin that's mostly free of oil and sediment. We would like the flavor of the origin to be transparent as possible. For this espresso extraction, we will be using the Weber 55mm bleach white filter. The next steps will concern over the preparation of the espresso grounds. We will place our espresso dose into the Weber blind shaker. We'll next use the barista hustle comb to break apart the grounds, and we'll use the blind shaker to settle the grounds and remove as much static as possible. After dosing the espresso grounds into the portafilter, we'll then add a puck screen on top of the grounds. We will be using a 58mm puck screen by Weber Workshops. This will minimize the over-extraction of the top layer of the espresso puck and help reduce channeling. And for our final step, we will be using the Decent V6 spring-loaded tamper. This will help us compress the grounds evenly and consistently. Here is an example of how we will perform espresso extraction. The machine that we will be using is the Decent DE1 Pro. The Decent allows us to control temperature, time, flow, and pressure. The Decent has many recipes that we could choose from. Which recipe we will use will evolve over time. For this demonstration, we will be using the Flow Espresso for Straight Espresso profile. The reason we're using this profile is because the parameters can be replicated by both home espresso machines and commercial machines. Once we have the recipe selected, we will preheat the group head and then attach the portafilter. We will place the decanter under the group head and then begin the extraction. We'll keep an eye out on time and yield. The Flow Espresso for Straight Espresso profile is broken down into two phases. During the pre-infusion phase, which will last 10 seconds, it'll run at 5 bars of pressure at 4 milliliters a second at 198 degrees Fahrenheit. And during the primary phase, we'll run the espresso at 8.6 bars of pressure at 2 milliliters a second at 198 degrees Fahrenheit. The espresso profile that we'll use might change in the future, but for now this is the one that we're starting with. In part 4, we're going to try to find a complementary recipe for this origin using these 3 extraction methods. We will begin with pour over using the next level Pulsar. We will try to find a complementary recipe within 6 extraction attempts. For flavor, our goal is to be within the extraction range of 20 to 24%. And for mouthfeel, we are looking to be within the range of 1.2 to 1.24 total dissolved solids. This allows us to experience the origin in a more developed and balanced way, ultimately being able to enjoy its full potential. This is the recipe we started with for attempt number 1 for pour-over extraction. The origin was 26 days off of roast, and we used a grind setting of 8.5 out of 10. Our brew time was 2 minutes and 24 seconds, and our total weight was 287 grams. For mouthfeel, we achieved a number of 1.18 total dissolved solids. For flavor, we achieved 20.78% extraction. Our analysis of this first attempt is that it's under-extracted and under-concentrated. Our adjustment for attempt number 2 will be to raise the concentration and the extraction. For attempt number 2, we made a fine grind adjustment from 8.5 to 8. We also increased our dose from 16.45 to 16.55. This changes our coffee to water ratio from 1 to 19.70 to 1 to 19.58. Our brew weight and our brew time increased, which is a good sign that our solubility increased as well. Unfortunately, we didn't see the increase in extraction and concentration that we were hoping for. Tasting and analyzing the origin, it still tastes under-concentrated and under-extracted. Our adjustment will be to continue to raise the extraction and the concentration. We felt we had entered the point of diminishing returns by going finer, so for attempt number 3, we decided to go coarser, from 8 to 9. Our brew time and brew weight relatively stayed the same. Our concentration and extraction decreased significantly. Tasting the origin, it now tastes more under-concentrated and under-extracted. The game plan for attempts number 4 to 6 is to get back to our desired target range for extraction and concentration. We made a significant fine grind adjustment from setting number 9 to 6.5. We were able to achieve the results we were looking for. Both our extraction and concentration increased. Analyzing this attempt, the mouthfeel feels sufficient, but the flavor feels slightly underdeveloped. Our adjustment for attempt number 5 is to slightly increase the extraction. To see if we're in the area of diminishing returns, we decided to make a slightly coarser adjustment from 6.5 to 6.7. The extraction increased slightly, but the concentration relatively stayed the same. Analyzing this attempt, the concentration still feels sufficient, however now the flavor feels close to ideal, sufficiently developed. Our adjustment for attempt number 6 is to slightly raise the extraction. We made several adjustments. We increased the brew temperature from 204 to 206, and we lowered the dose from 16.55 to 16.45. We feel both of these adjustments will help increase the extraction slightly. However, both of these adjustments decrease the extraction and the concentration. Later on, we'll reveal which of these 6 extraction attempts we felt was most complementary, but for now we'll jump into the next part of the process. Now that we have finished dialing in for pour over, we'll now begin the process of dialing in for batch brew extraction. For our first batch brew extraction attempt, we decided to go first with the coarse grind setting, 7.5, and the origin is 34 days off of roast. Our brew temperature was 205 degrees and our coffee to water ratio was 16.45 grams to 324 grams. Because of the roast degree of this origin, we are using a bloom time of 45 seconds and a medium flow rate. For our first attempt, we were not able to find ourselves in our ideal concentration and extraction range. For mouthfeel, we achieved a concentration of 1.10 total dissolved solids, and for flavor, we achieved an extraction range of 18.72%, both of which are on the low side. Our adjustment for attempt number 2 is to try something to significantly raise the concentration and extraction. For attempt number 2, we made a significant fine grind adjustment from 7.5 to 6. To raise the concentration, we increased our dose from 16.45 to 16.55. Our coffee to water ratio is now 1 to 19.58. Fortunately, our concentration and extraction increased significantly. For mouthfeel, we achieved a concentration of 1.23 total dissolved solids. And for flavor, we achieved an extraction percentage of 20.81. We are now in our desired concentration and extraction range. Analyzing the solution, it tastes slightly under-concentrated and under-extracted. Our goal for the next attempt is to continue to raise the concentration and extraction. For attempt number 3, we primarily made a fine grind adjustment from 6 to 5.5. Our brew weight slightly decreased and our concentration and extraction relatively stayed the same. Our concentration went from 1.23 to 1.26, and the extraction went from 20.81 to 20.78. Our analysis of this attempt is that the concentration feels sufficient, but the extraction feels a little bit underdeveloped, so we'll focus on that next. To raise the extraction, we made a fine grind adjustment from 5.5 to 5. Our concentration relatively stayed the same, but our extraction did increase a little bit. Tasting the solution, it still feels underdeveloped in the extraction department, so we'll work on raising the extraction in the next attempt. To continue to raise the extraction, we made a fine grind adjustment from 5 to 4.5. And thankfully this time, our extraction did increase, from 21.07 to 21.56. Tasting the solution, both the mouthfeel and the flavor feel sufficiently developed. We have one more attempt for batch brew extraction. Our goal will be to slightly lower the extraction and see what that tastes like. For this last attempt, we made a slight course adjustment from 4.5 to 4.7. This adjustment increased the solubility, and as a result, both the concentration and the extraction increased. Analyzing attempt number 6, the concentration feels heavy and the extraction feels overdeveloped. We'll compare and contrast these 6 extraction attempts, and then we'll come to a conclusion as to which is most complementary. This concludes our dial-in process with batch brew extraction. We'll now begin dialing in this origin for espresso. These are the parameters for our first extraction attempt. We started with the grind setting number 2, and our water temperature is 198. We started with 18 grams in the basket. The parameters for our pre-infusion phase were 10 seconds at 5 bar and at 4.0 milliliters per second. And for the primary phase, our parameters were to run it continuously at 8.6 bars of pressure at 2.0 milliliters per second. This led us to a brew time of 50 seconds and an output of 34 grams. This gave us a concentration of 11.97 total dissolved solids, and we achieved an extraction percentage of 22.61. Analyzing this attempt, the mouthfeel is overconcentrated and the flavor is overdeveloped. Our adjustment will be to decrease the concentration and the extraction. For the second attempt, we primarily made a course adjustment from 2 to 2.5. We cut the espresso at 45 seconds, which gave us a yield of 45.47 grams. This ultimately gave us a concentration of 8.72 total dissolved solids, and accompanied by an extraction percentage of 22.03%. Analyzing attempt number 2, we feel we're in the same position where the mouthfeel feels overconcentrated and the flavor feels overdeveloped. Our adjustment for attempt number 3 will be to continue to decrease the concentration and extraction. For this attempt, we made another course adjustment from 2.5 to 3. We stopped the espresso at 45 seconds, which gave us a yield of 52.15 grams. This gave us an extraction percentage of 6.88 total dissolved solids and an extraction percentage of 19.93%. The concentration feels insufficient and the extraction feels underdeveloped, so for the next attempt we will try to raise both. The adjustment we made for attempt number 4 is to make a fine grind adjustment from 3 to 2.8. We concluded the shot at 47 seconds, which gave us a yield of 49.39 grams. This gave us a concentration number of 7.45 total dissolved solids with an extraction percentage of 20.44%. The mouthfeel tastes sufficient and the flavor feels developed. Tasting this attempt, the concentration and the extraction feel balanced and developed. Our adjustment for the next attempt is to test whether we have reached the limit with concentration and extraction. To know if there's more concentration or extraction to be achieved, we made a small fine grind adjustment from 2.8 to 2.7. We concluded the shot at 48 seconds, which gave us a yield of 47.75. This gave us a concentration number of 8.10 total dissolved solids, and our extraction percentage was 21.48. This adjustment increased the concentration and the extraction. Tasting the origin, the mouthfeel feels heavier and the flavor feels overdeveloped. Coming up in our last attempt, we will try to make an adjustment to decrease the concentration and the extraction to get it closer to attempt number 4. For our last attempt, we made a course adjustment from 2.7 to 2.9. We stopped the shot at 46 seconds, which gave us a yield of 51.13 grams. This gave us a concentration number of 7.12 total dissolved solids with an extraction percentage of 20.22%. Tasting the origin, both the concentration and the extraction feel balanced and sufficient. We have now concluded part 4. Next we will go over which recipe from each medium we felt was most complementary to the origin. Here are the extraction attempts from each medium that we felt was most complementary to the origin. For extraction by pour over with the next level Pulsar, we found attempt number 6 was the most complementary. At 28 days off of roast, we liked the water to coffee ratio of 16.45 to 324 grams. This gave us a ratio of 1 to 19.70. We used a water temperature of 204 degrees and a grind setting of 6.7 out of 10. This gave us a brew time of 2 minutes and 49 seconds for a beverage weight of 288 grams. Ultimately, this recipe gave us a concentration number of 1.21 total dissolved solids with an extraction percentage of 21.18. For extraction by batch brew, the recipe that we found most complementary was attempt number 5. At 37 days off of roast, we used a coffee to water ratio of 16.55 grams to 324 grams. This gave us a ratio of 1 to 19.58. This recipe used a water temperature of 205 degrees and a grind setting of 4.5 out of 10. This gave us a brew time of 2 minutes and 53 seconds with a beverage weight of 281 grams. And we ultimately achieved a concentration number of 1.27 total dissolved solids and an extraction percentage of 21.56. And finally, for espresso extraction, the recipe that we found most complementary was attempt number 4. For this recipe, we started with an 18-gram dose, a grind setting of 2.8, and a brew temperature of 198 degrees. We had a pre-infusion phase that lasted 10 seconds at 5 bars of pressure at 4 milliliters a second. And during the primary phase, we were running it at 8.6 bars of pressure at 2 milliliters a second. We stopped the shot at 47 seconds, which ultimately gave us a yield of 49.39 grams. This gave us a concentration number of 7.45 with an extraction percentage of 20.44. Throughout this process, we were extracting this origin by these 3 different mediums, but we felt one medium was really showcasing the origin very well. And we will reveal which medium and recipe it was momentarily. Before we get to that point, we will go over the aroma and flavor analysis that we detected from the most complementary method and recipe. Starting with the aroma, the first note that we detected was a pulpy sweetness. The second note that we detected is a tanginess. The final note that we detect at the end is a delicateness, where the notes are soft and subtle. Now, trying to describe these notes in a more detailed way, the pulpy sweetness that we first detected reminds us of a light-colored honey. That tanginess in the middle reminds us of a red grape. And the delicate note that we detected in the end reminds us of a juicy fruit sweetness. We'll now get into the flavor analysis and categorization of this origin, and the first note that we detected is again that pulpy sweetness. The second note that we can detect is a sweet, juicy fruitness. The sweet sensation continues until the end, but now it resembles something more tangy. Now, in a more detailed way, that first note of pulpy sweetness reminds us of a cooked and reduced honey. The red grape sensation that we detected in the aroma continues to be present here. And finally, what we detect at the end is a sweet tanginess that reminds us of Coca-Cola. This now concludes part 6, our analysis and categorization of the aroma and flavor. This is part 7, the conclusion to our dial-in process. We will now begin assembling a recipe that we would recommend to extract this origin with. This origin comes from Central America, in the region of Tarazu in the country of Costa Rica. This origin comes from a co-op, which is a collection of small farm holders. This Tarazu organization includes 3,500 members. Specifically, this origin was grown between 1,400 to 1,500 meters above sea level. It is comprised of 2 varietals, Catura and Catuay. The fruit and the seed were developed by using the honey process method. This is when the seed is left to ferment and dry with a certain amount of the mucilage still attached to it. The lotus water simple and sweet recipe complemented the origin's honey process method and the way it was roasted by Edison Coffee from Louisville, Texas. And when we were performing the espresso extraction, we were using the modified version of the simple and sweet recipe. We then extracted this origin by batch brew, pour over, and espresso, and each gave us a different representation of the origin. Throughout this process, we felt extraction by batch brew complemented this origin more than the other 2. And this is the method that we would recommend to extract the origin with. After performing 6 extraction attempts by batch brew, we found the recipe of attempt number 5 the most complementary. At 37 days off of roast, we enjoyed the coffee to water ratio of 16.55 grams to 324 grams, which equals to 1 to 19.58. We enjoyed the water temperature of 205 degrees and the grind setting of 4.5 out of 10. This gave us a brew time of 2 minutes and 53 seconds for a beverage weight of 281 grams, for a mouthfeel weight of 1.27 total dissolved solids, and a flavor development of 21.56% extraction. This concludes narrative 9 of our dialing process. Thank you for watching.